Hello everyone. So I'm going to go through the master plan part 3 today and try and highlight some of the most important points I feel are the most important. I had a quick look at it yesterday in my video, but I clearly misunderstood the chart that I was looking at, and I've seen some videos online that are also misunderstanding some of the information in this document. I'll try and go through it and try and clear up any misunderstandings. Might be a longer video today, but this information I think is highly valuable, and if you're interested, I recommend reading the entire master plan. Here we go. Let's highlight some of the details. So master plan part 3, sustainable energy for all of Earth. So what Tesla has done here is basically they've run the numbers and calculated that this is feasible. They've looked at the current costs of the fossil fuel energy environment and looks at the cost of what it would take to switch to a completely sustainable energy economy. The executive summary here says the analysis has 3 main components: electricity demand, forecast the electricity demand of a fully electric economy that meets global energy needs without fossil fuels. Electricity supply, construct a least cost portfolio of electricity generation and storage resources that satisfies hourly electricity demand. Material feasibility and investment, determine the feasibility of material needs for the electric economy and manufacturing investment necessary to enable it. Once they've ran all these numbers, they realize that this is feasible. There's nothing that really is a barrier, that is an impossible barrier to this plan. So kind of the sum of the numbers here, Tesla has decided that 240 terawatt hours of energy storage would be needed, through 30 terawatts of renewable power energy generation, $10 trillion investment, half the energy required as compared to the current energy system, which is an interesting one, and we'll get into. 1/5 of 1% of land area required for solar panels and windmills to power this potential future. And that 10 trillion represents 10% of world GDP. If you stretch this out over 10 years, that'd be 1% GDP per year, or if you stretch it out over 20 years, it could be 0.5% of GDP per year over a 20-year period. So looking at the current energy economy, it's very wasteful. It's kind of sad when you look at this. Currently, fossil fuels is the big energy source. Tesla has got these numbers looking at the United States. According to this document, it was the best source of data. So they kind of looked at the United States, made the calculations, and then estimated what it would need for the entire world to make the transition. These numbers they're not going to be 100% accurate, but they're an estimate based on looking good data from the United States and then extrapolating that out to the entire world. We already know that fossil fuels as a source of energy, there's a lot of waste there. So this chart here shows that we see the inputs here. We got fossil fuels as our input, renewables and biomass already existing, and the uses in the middle here. And then at the end, what we get, almost 2/3 of it is just wasted in the form of heat. And then 1/3 of it is actually used to move our vehicles and to heat our homes. The result that we actually want is only 1/3 of the energy use. And this is why there's so much room for improvement. There's 2/3 of it is just wasted. It's a massive area where we can improve, and why the cost to make the switch will actually be cheaper, as they point out, will most likely be cheaper because we'll take so much of this waste out of the energy economy. It's a wasteful system that we're currently in. And I would say if you look at just at an internal combustion engine vehicle, a gas vehicle is very wasteful. It produces a ton of heat, but we don't want heat. We want motion to get from A to B. And that's why an internal combustion engine vehicle has a huge radiator, because we got to cool it down. And that energy is not doing anything useful. It's just being wasted. And the braking too. When the brakes go on, the brake rotors heat up, but we don't want that heat. And we can't make use of it. However, in an electric vehicle, we can actually make use of that extra energy, and that's the regenerative braking. Plan to eliminate fossil fuels. They have a 6-part plan, so we'll go through that here. Number 1 is repower the existing grid with renewables. Instead of having natural gas plants and coal plants, etc., we switch over to a lot of solar and wind, maybe some geothermal plants to make the energy economy sustainable. Number 2, switch to electric vehicles. So this chart here, we have an example comparing Tesla Model 3 energy consumption versus Toyota Corolla. The Toyota Corolla, when driving, consumes 1,000 watt hours per mile to get from A to B. And then getting that energy to the Toyota Corolla has quite a bit of losses here in the gray, versus a Model 3 has a much lower energy use because the electric motor is so much more efficient. We're not wasting that heat. It's not generating a lot of heat. We're actually using the electricity at about an 80 to 90% efficiency to actually move from A to B. So we see the difference here. Roughly about 1/4 of the energy is needed to get from A to B. Still some losses in the upstream to get that energy to the vehicle, but much less than getting the gas to a gas-powered vehicle. Number 3, switch to heat pumps in residential, business, and industry. An area I'm kind of familiar with, as I did work for a company that installed geothermal heating and cooling systems for residential homes. And a geothermal heating and cooling system is a heat pump. That's what a heat pump is. So we see there's air source, there's water source, ground source, and waste heat as sources of energy for a heat pump. The company I've worked for, we installed ground source heat pumps for residential homes. So we basically put a big radiator in somebody's backyard, and there's basically free energy that you can grab from your backyard. The sun has been heating up the ground for centuries, and it stays at a relative temperature, and you can use that basically. The heat pump is basically transferring heat from one area to the next, and is much more efficient than burning fossil fuels to get the job done. Basically, for 1 unit of energy, you get 3 to 4 units of heat. So it kind of blew my mind when I saw it, because it's basically, you get this free energy that's just sitting there in your backyard. So yeah, it's a huge part of a sustainable future. So we need to transition homes and commercial buildings to this kind of heating and cooling. And that's another cool thing, is heat pumps can go both ways. You can heat and cool with the same unit. You just reverse the process. It can flow either way. The heat can flow out of the house, or the heat can flow into the house, and the same unit can cause that to happen. Whereas right now, you need an air conditioning unit and a gas furnace to do your heating and cooling. So this chart here, we see the gas furnace, how much energy it uses. Very similar efficiency gains by switching to a heat pump compared to electric vehicles versus gas cars, up to around, well, they're saying here the 3x heat pump efficiency factor reduces the energy demand if all gas appliances are electrified. So they're saying roughly 3 times more efficient for the use of heat pumps. It's a big part of Tesla's plan for the future. They already have heat pumps in their vehicles, and it seems like eventually they're going to get into making heat pumps for residential homes and maybe offices and commercial buildings. And again, the heat pump in the car does the heating and the cooling. So you get a 2-in-1 benefit there. They're saying that the heat pump can now be used for industrial uses as well, for even up to 100 to 200 degrees Celsius generation. However, you lose some efficiency at that high of heat. Instead of being 3 to 4 times as efficient, it's only 1.5 times more efficient. Once we get into the renewable energy economy, we'll actually be in a situation where we have so much energy, we don't know what to do with it all. So it will make sense to use heat pumps for these higher energy demands, such as commercial applications, which is number 4 here. Electrify high temperature heat delivery and hydrogen production. So this is a very energy intense process, and it's further down the line, I would say, in this plan to transition to the new energy economy of sustainable energy. But once we have that abundance, we'll be able to cost effectively power these types of systems. So they give the examples here of industrial processes that require high temperatures, which includes steel, chemical, fertilizer, and cement production, among others. The 5th step, another one that'll probably be later on in the stages of making the switch to renewable energy economy, is planes and boats. So Tesla has also put that in their calculations, that eventually we could power planes and boats with some design changes, etc. It's also possible to power them. And then number 6 is manufacture the sustainable energy economy. Along the lines of having excess power generation, this situation actually exists already in some portions of the world. So they mention here curtailment, which is basically when you have too much energy generation, you have to shut it off because they can't make use of the power. This already exists in markets with high renewable energy penetration. In 2020, 19% of wind generation in Scotland was curtailed. And in 2022, 6% of solar generation in California was curtailed due to operational constraints. So we're already starting to see, this abundant situation where you have too much, then you know what to do with. And that's why the storage part of this plan becomes important, because you want to be able to store a good portion of that when you can. So they also modeled out what the result would be if we made this switch. What would that look like versus what we have now, that we saw in the first flow chart there. So this is assuming we've made those changes. We have 99.4% sustainable electricity being generated. They're showing some biomass generation as well, and then the uses in the middle. But at the end, according to their calculations, we now have close to 2/3 useful work in heat, and then curtailed renewables. So this is excess generation that maybe we'll find, we'll be able to use for planes and boats and whatnot, because we just have so much energy to power those kind of high energy demand commercial uses. Now, again, this was calculated looking at the United States, and then it says here, timesing that by 6, the global generation and storage portfolio to meet the electricity demand was calculated by scaling the U.S. resource mix by 6 times. As noted above, this is a significant simplification and could be an area for improvement in future analysis, as global energy demands are different from the U.S. in their composition and expected to increase over time. This analysis was conducted on the U.S. due to availability of high-fidelity hourly data. So it was focused on the States, but they times it by 6 roughly to see what the world would need in terms of energy. You see in this world, according to their calculations, as far as waste in this new energy structure, it looks to be about less than 10% versus 2/3 as we have right now. So way more efficient use of energy if this transition was made, according to Tesla's calculations. Now, this is the chart where there's been a lot of confusion, and I was confused too initially, the batteries for transportation. So this is looking at the worldwide fleet. So it says today there are 1.4 billion vehicles globally, and annual passenger vehicle production of 85 million vehicles, according to OICA, based on pack size assumptions. The vehicle fleet will require 112 terawatt hours of batteries. Autonomy has potential to reduce the global fleet and annual production required, though through improved vehicle utilization. So this chart, there's been a lot of confusion that they're thinking, I thought this too, that this is the pack size that Tesla is using. No, this is the average for the worldwide fleet. This is the annual vehicle sales in the future where all the vehicles are electrified, and Tesla will only get a portion of these sales, 10-20% of this 42 million. And then the global fleet would have this many vehicles in this category, and that's how many batteries would be needed. So this pack size is just what they calculate to be the average for vehicles in that segment, the compact segment. It's not what Tesla is going to have for their pack size. It's not even just Tesla's average pack size. It's the global average pack size for a compact vehicle. And that goes throughout this chart. So the long range heavy duty truck, they're saying on average, anyone who builds an electric transport truck, they expect roughly the pack size to be 800 kilowatt hours. So this is worldwide estimates. And then the sales worldwide, when we reach a point of 100% electric vehicles on the road, and Tesla will only potentially get a portion of these vehicle sales. So you could make some assumptions and calculate what you expect Tesla would get of this total market. So they just wanted to calculate how many batteries would be needed, because they also wanted to know, like, do we have enough materials to make this happen? So they're not just looking at what Tesla's going to do. They're looking at what we need worldwide to solve this problem. So yeah, the bus, it's TBD, to be determined. So I thought maybe, Tesla might make a bus, which they might, but they're just saying they expect there to be buses in the future. So they wanted to calculate that in. And if they're electrified, how many sales would there be? They're estimating 1 million, and how many batteries you would need for that. And they go on to To break this down more, if you want to get into the weeds more with more details, I recommend going through this document. Now, this is an interesting one here. So we're looking at what this is going to cost. So investment required. And they're giving this a 20-year time period. So they're saying Tesla has calculated if we stuck with the fossil fuel world that we're in right now, the continued investment in that space would cost about $14 trillion over the next 20 years based on current rates. So we would have to continue to explore for fossil fuels and mine them, and there's a cost to that. So this is what they have calculated that cost to be, $14 trillion. But then they're saying, for comparison, if we make the investment into a sustainable energy economy, it's going to be 10 trillion. We've heard a lot of people say like it's too expensive. We can't make this transition because it's just going to cost too much. Well, according to Tesla, they're saying no, it's actually going to save us money by spreading this out over a 20-year horizon to make the transition to a sustainable energy future. They break this down even further. I won't go through it all. It's just too much data here to put into this video. This video is already getting long enough. Hopefully you're still with me. Here's an interesting one here. The land area required for solar and wind installations that would be needed to make this switch to a fully sustainable future. So they have these dots on the screen that they're actually on each continent, but you can barely see them because they're so small. And that's the land area that would be needed to put in a solar field or a wind field to generate this clean electricity, renewable electricity. They also broke it down, all the materials required. So I've heard this argument quite a few times. There's just not enough lithium, or there's not enough copper to make this transition. So Tesla has looked at that as well, and here's what they have come up with. So this top chart here is the materials required relative to 2023 USGS estimated resources. So the USGS estimates, like, this is the 100%, like the total reserves in the world it would be here. That's 100%. Tesla is saying, well, we'd only need 20% of the known reserves to make this transition. Even less nickel, even less silver, and you can see even less going down the list. Tesla is saying there's no shortage of materials to make this switch. There's plenty out there. We just need to go get it. So yeah, people seem to think that we know exactly how much is out there, and yeah, there's not enough, and so that supply is just going to go down. But here's what actually happens. The global reserve estimates keep going up, and it kind of makes sense when you think about it, because you can't find what you're not looking for. So now that we're in a world where, yeah, we need a lot of lithium for these batteries, people are looking for it. People are entrepreneurs. They're like, oh, but they need all this lithium. Well, if I could find a bunch of lithium, I might have a good business there. So this red line here shows the lithium reserves over time continuing to increase, because we kept finding more. As we looked for it, we found more and more. And the same thing happened with oil. I remember thinking that, reading a book or something, an article saying like peak oil was coming, but we just kept finding more. So this is not a new phenomenon. We kind of assume that we know where it all is, and if we start using it, it's just going to deplete. But in actuality, as we look for more, we find more, and then we realize the reserves are actually bigger. So it doesn't appear to be any problem as far as material needs for this transition. The cool thing about making the switch to a renewable energy economy is that we can now, once we mined a good portion of those materials, we can switch to mainly recycling. And this chart here kind of shows how that might look in the 2030s. So this is raw materials. So yeah, mined materials is going to go up and up, but then as more recycling plants come online, we won't need as much raw material. So their calculations suggest it's going to kind of level off but still increase. But then once we'll reach a balance point, once we get enough recycling plants and used batteries coming back into these facilities, we'll actually see a demand drop for new raw materials that are mined. Still increasing over time, it shows here, but the demand will lessen because we'll have so much more recycling, which is a cool feature, I would say, of a renewable future, because when you look at fossil fuel, there's no recycling there. You burn it and it's gone, and then it's all has to be raw material brought back in, hence the non-renewable nature of fossil fuels. So conclusion, a fully electrified and sustainable economy is within reach through the actions in this paper. 1, repower the existing grid with renewables. 2, switch to electric vehicles. 3, switch to heat pumps in residential, business, and industry. 4, electrify temperature, heat delivery, and hydrogen production. Sustainably fuel planes and boats. And 6, manufacture the sustainable energy economy. Modeling reveals that the electrified and sustainable future is technically feasible and requires less investment and less material extraction than continuing today's unsustainable energy economy. Yeah, this is a big study, and I'm sure people will come out with other studies that refute this, their findings. As you know, it's Tesla, and they have a bias to what they want to do. However, they would be wise to make the numbers as accurate as possible for their own benefit. I believe that Tesla is trying to do that here. But maybe their own bias blinds them a bit. We're humans, we're not perfect, but this may be one of the best looks into the potential for a sustainable energy economy. There's now, I skipped through a lot of data here, and if you want to get into the weeds, you can really do that here. But I'm glad that there's people out there doing this research, and I don't feel they're off base with their projections. However, I have not done a study in such depth. Cool to see, and gives a lot of hope for the future. Like to live in a world with an abundance of energy to the point where we have an overabundance and we got to curtail that's pretty interesting. And there's a lot of people in the world who could use a lot more energy to enrich their lives. So I see this as something very positive for humanity. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now. This has been going on for quite a while, so I don't know if anyone's still there, but hopefully you enjoyed. My name's Evan Bertrand. This is the Evergreen Channel. Thanks for watching.